I want to thank you very much for your presentation and sharing your professional experience with us, thereby emphasizing how important issues of economic crimes and corruption are to the stability of a nation, especially one emerging out of conflict. You've given us practical, real-life experience on how a single issue of corruption can derail or undermine the security and stability of an entire nation, and how it impacts on the life of ordinary people. And that it will require strong political will of our leaders, as well as the commitment of those of us who are in civil society to ensure that we have a transparent and accountable system, both at the executive, judiciary, and legislative branches of government. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Commissioners, we want to take this time to ask questions. Okay, we'll start with Commissioner Umu Sila. But before that, I'd like to ask if you know whether or not the bulk purchasing system is still in place today.
No, I think the bulk purchasing scheme is not in place now, and it has not been in place recently. I'm not sure in the last 3 administrations whether the bulk purchasing were in place. No, every entity of government are now buying for themselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness, for your testimony. And thank you so much for the information provided regarding transamination issues and other issues. I would like to start with the transamination. You said that morning when the incident happened, Frank Zamington said he did the planning all by himself. And then in the jeep, somebody or the security that covered former President Doe must have been killed or was killed. Do you remember his name or any other person that died that day?
Well, there were about 4 persons in the jeep: the driver, the right-hand security, Doe in the center, and 2 persons. According to Frank Zamington, when he deflated the tires, the guy on the right hand jumped into the flower bush, the driver jumped. So the jeep was there, 4 tires flattening, or tires on the side down, and the 2 bodyguards at the back fell on top of Doe. The ones who were right on top is Ross. I think Ross is still living. Ross' whole spinal cord was shattered with a 45 caliber. And Frank Zamington said he fired directly into the car and just thought about putting 3, 4, 5 bullets in there. All of them had died, but nobody died from in the car. No.
So how's Ross now? Is it all his spinal cord?
Oh yeah, Ross was sent to Germany. Okay. I saw him some 10, 15 years ago. Had 3, 4 albums. I had to patch him up. He was somewhere in town here.
So he's okay. He started to walk.
I think so, but I haven't seen him the last 3, 4, 5 years. But we met and we exchanged notes where we knew each other, and he brought 1,000 photographs, what booms they put where and what they did. He stayed in Germany for some years for recovery, but I saw him alive.
And then what happened to Frank Zamington bus?
The bus?
Yes, he said that the politicians were not involved. He and the boss was responsible for that in the morning to personal use.
His boss man?
Yeah, boss man.
General C.
Yeah, General C.
After the confession that morning, because all along General C was not involved, they never called him. In fact, everybody just thought that Zamington was the executive mansion by the guy, battalion commander. He wasn't. It was that money for many persons knew that he was a deputy. I think after that, the military hierarchy called in general, say, and had the NRA, we were not called there again. Yeah, but I know he was in town here. I saw him one time. I'm sure maybe he's still alive too.
He's still alive.
Yeah.
And then you stated numerous instances where government pay for goods and then it will not deliver. So what happened? After the investigation bureau was set up and then you discover, did the government at the time take any step to ensure that, the goods were delivered or to retrieve the money back?
You see, Madam Commissioner, this is where we have problem with the system. When we requested to probe that matter based on Clarence Momolu's revelation, we argued that there was no control mechanism between the movement of the goods from the vendor to the GSA warehouses. Because Clarence Momolu was speaking in 1983. He was talking about an incident that took place in 1981. So goods have been paid for since 1981. By 83, they were still with vendors. And so our argument was, we need a mechanism to monitor the movement of the goods from the warehouses now, from the vendors to GSA warehouses. But while that probe was going on, perhaps some people got uncomfortable with it, because we're in the end of 1984. So March 1985, the National Force for the Eradication of Corruption received instructions from President Doe that the force was dissolved and its members redeployed with the Ministry of National Security. We had hoped that when we went to the Ministry of National Security, they too were going to develop interest in that report because they saw the report. Secondly, we had hoped that Clarence Momolu would have followed up that report to retrieve the goods. But that did not happen. I'm sure Clarence Momolu is here. Perhaps he needs to be called and be questioned on what happened to $3.5 million worth of goods that were with vendors when he took over. Because when he took over, BMC was still here, Dillon Brothers were still active, SETI was still active, Ready Fusion was still active, and all of these entities still existed. By 1985, by 1983, they were still here. So as Director General of the GSA, he should have gone to them and retrieved those goods from the vendors. Whether he did, whether he didn't, we don't know. But I can testify that by March 1985, none of the goods have been withdrawn from any store, because I was on the investigation.
Is there any reason why? Now, your last statement, you said former President Tolbert dismissed his brother-in-law for corrupt practices, and then you gave an example of the incident. And you will agree with me that one reason why that government was overthrown was rampant corruption. And then in your opening statement, you said before Tolbert, people were not aware about issue of corruption. Why did you say that?
Well, I may have not been enlightened as I am now, but I know I was in school at the time, and I didn't hear the phrase economic crime before 1976. The phrase economic crime. Many ordinary people, many those who were not in government, those who had nothing to do with state function, didn't know much about what corruption was. Until Tolbert set up the National Force for the Eradication of Corruption. Because by setting up that force, they conducted civic education. They informed people what the effect and nature of corruption. So people begin to understand, oh, so this is corruption. So if I steal a ream of paper, that's corruption. Okay, but then I will not steal one ream again, I will steal 5. Some got plenty there. So people begin, in my mind, it was an eye-opener. That agency opened people's mind and focus about what corruption actually was. So it was later wonder that by 1979, the Red Riot took place because everybody thought Tolbert was being corrupt by increasing the price of rest just because so he would benefit. At that time, they say how rumors around that Tolbert was buying from Belefana, and that was corruption. So in essence, I'm saying it was at that time in my mind that I think the ordinary people, the big book people, they knew what corruption was at the time. But the ordinary wheelbarrow pusher, the guy from the ghetto, they didn't know what corruption was, I think, until that force started working. And I was one of those who was sent in one of the counties. I worked in 4 of the counties: Lofa, Nimba, Lofa, Bong, Cape Mount, and Margibi. So our activities there educated people. They knew now if the school principal took a teacher's check, that was corruption. They knew if you put somebody's name on a payroll and the person was not working, that was corruption. They knew if the messenger was working to the principal's house, that was corruption. So people eyes open and corruption issue begin to spread, people begin sensitive, and that's what I meant by that.
Is there any reason why the PRC government closed down the bureau?
Well, they gave us one reason, one official reason. The Ministry of National Security had just been established or had been reactivated by 1982, 83 thereabout. And they say the ministry needed staff. So instead of going to look for people to train, it would be good to take the National Force for the Eradication of Personnel and redeploy them at the Ministry of National Security. But that was not the story. We who were handling cases, we knew why they did that. Because I know we handled one case, we won't call names on these microphones. We handled a case with a lady who had relationship with the PRC working at the Freeport. And that morning, we called the lady in at the mansion. That's where our office was. And then while she was there, she took the telephone and called the president's office. And the president said, "Where are you?" She said, "Oh, I'm here at the Anti-Corruption Bureau." He said, "What are you doing there?" He said, "Oh, the people sent for me. Whole day they have been keeping me here." He said, "Who are the people that sent for you?" And they called our director, Mrs. Claudia Nelson. And she called and we said, "Oh yes, this is a case with this lady." And though really got nervous. So you just go around here calling people. You just would call anybody to your office. It didn't take more than 3 months and we had our transfer. And there were many similar instances. One, there was Samson Roberts, Colonel Samson, Joseph Samson. I had an encounter with him. There was an Indian guy here on Randall Street. The April 12 celebrations were coming. And so he took his clothes, his children's clothes, his wife's clothes, he cleaned them and put it in the store to sell. And somebody gave the information. And I went in there and we identified the clothes. And I said, "But this is my business practice. You can't take your wife's clothes because next week Wednesday is April 12th and people are buying. So you will sell your wife's clothes." So we made it a case. This man took my complaint to the PRC. And that day, they sent for me. 7 armed men went for me at the mansion. They took me to the offices of Colonel Sampson. I was disrobed and asked to be sent to the post target because I'm a paramilitary person. Colonel Sampson said, "Why I went to investigate this man, why we close it, man. As fate would have it, while we were going down the stairs, they were going to LEC to appoint a new managing director. So the Motorola rang. They said the chief is going to LEC. Everybody's supposed to be there. So I told the officer escorting me, I said, "My boss lady is going to LEC. I'm accompanying her. When I come back, I can say send me to the cell." And I ran away from them. And all of that somewhere, it didn't take any time. The PRC now begin to see that this corruption that they charged Tolbert with, they were really involved in it now. And there were people who were determined to expose them. And that didn't go down well with them. So that issue of we will redeploying you to the Ministry of National Security, I think was just an official cover. But underneath, I think we were getting at them too much. They were not comfortable with us. And moreover, the Anti-Corruption Bureau was not established by an act of legislature. It was by a presidential mandate. And it had outlived its usefulness. Since Tolbert set it up in 1975, 1985, we're 10 years old now, living on a presidential mandate. So I think somebody just stood and closed the people down. So I think that's why they did it.
Thank you very much. You know, the issue of corruption have been an issue in this country for several decades. Why is it that it's still creeping after all these years, after seeing the effect of corruption based on your experience? Why is it so difficult for people to do away with corrupt practices, especially public offices?
Well, I put it this way, to be honest. I think and I believe in my mind, enough political will has not been exhibited. We have not been able to look our relatives in the faces and tell them, say, sister or brother, look, you are embarrassing me. I can't keep you on this job. We've not been able to do that. And as long as we don't do that, we know it is impossible. It is a near impossibility to say that corruption will be eradicated. No. But we are equally aware, professionally, that corruption can be controlled. We can minimize it. The people will not clap. When you just got a job in government yesterday, in 6 months, in 3 months, you got 3 palaces. They will not clap for you unless they got evidence that you won the Canadian lottery or the Australian lottery or that you found a piece of diamond. Otherwise, if you just on a government salary with a $50 or $75 or $1,000 per month, it's impossible for you to own a structure that will cost about $150,000 in 6 months. So I think lack of political will and cultural impunity continues to contribute to corruption. Moreover, they need to establish specialized institutions. Fighting corruption is a specialized job. It is not about how much book you know. Book is good because you will have to be able to read, you have to write the reports. But people who fight, who are involved in fighting economic crimes, must have a piece of love and a fear for God in their heart. Something must always ring that this thing is not right, don't go along with it. So, you can recruit 20 doctorate degree holders. If they are all corrupt, you will get nowhere. And therefore, it's a specialized function. It's not a job that anybody can do. I am saying that. It's not a job that anybody can do. Others went in there and they are millionaires today. Others went in there and they're still renting rooms. But they're happy. So fighting corruption must call for people whose character are impeccable. People who can knock their chest and walk the streets without people pointing at them negatively. People who can stand up and say, I say, and nobody else say. But otherwise, we'll not get anywhere. And that is why we're going in cycles in corruption. Lack of political will, culture of impunity. We have to have a time to say, the box start here. The red line is drawn. The other line is the battle line. Because corruption is a boa constrictor. It swallows and sleeps. When that which it swallows decays, it's reawakening and is ready to attack again. So why do you think they are withholding the passage of the Asset Freeze Act at the House? Perhaps corrupt people are putting together and fighting that the act will not pass. Because if you pass the act, they will begin to seize properties around here. You can't get in government 90 days and you got an account overseas about 100,000. You gotta be joking. In short, in the fight against corruption in Liberia, the beautiful ones are not yet born.
Thank you very much.
Testing, testing. Thank you very much, Mr. Julius, for your presentation, and particularly representing the Economic Crimes Committee. We're grateful for your input so far to these hearings. In fact, we hope to have ongoing communication with you as we strive to unravel the various issues and problems that took place from 1979 to 2003, linked to economic crimes. As you rightly said, this is a quiet but deadly destructor of all human rights, democracy, and everything else in a young society, because it takes away the very lifeblood. Just as in our bodies we have blood flowing with life to keep us alive, in a social environment is the funds and resources, whether it's cash or other natural resources, that provides that life-giving power for the society to grow and develop. Especially here in Africa, we find ourselves filled with the issues of what I call the dip state, disease, ignorance, and poverty, constantly keeping us from fulfilling our true human potential and value as God's children. So some of my questions would just be linking to further understanding of what has been happening in this area that you have seemed to have been working in for many years. For example, my first concern is the issue of legality of economic crimes. Could you shed some light on that, if you can give us a little overview based on your experience? Because we realize that according to the law, if you say somebody has committed a crime, the country that that person is in has to first agree that such a reality is a crime. Now, you mentioned earlier about Liberia living with a culture of sort of corrupt nature. In fact, I coined a word myself recently in a book I wrote. I call it CSIMS, the culture of corruption, impunity, and selfishness. And I paralleled that to something like the AIDS virus. It's in your system, it breaks down the protective mechanism of your system. So we who are the implementing partners of a true democratic society should be standing up for certain values and ideals, but we're broken down by this culture of corruption. So in Liberia, do we have legal structures to define economic crimes and therefore allow investigators to properly go after people and issues of this nature? That would be my first question of concern.
Well, I'm aware, I may not quote the exact portion, but I'm aware all acts of financial improprieties have been summed up into the new penal code as theft of property. And under theft of property, they will explain bribery and all these other forms of corruption. I am also aware that there is an Economic Sabotage Act, and that act clearly defines what economic crimes are. The problem we're having is, again, I'll say 1 million times, the political will. We got an act laying down that says if a man does X, Y, blah, Z, A, B, C should happen to him. So yes, to answer your question, there are legal instruments available addressing the issues of economic crime in Liberia. We have them on the books.
But as you said, the problem is the political will.
The political will doesn't seem to exist to addressing those who are accused or guilty of economic crime.
I see. Thank you. My next concern, you mentioned about an investigation that took place earlier with regards to using public funds to place orders for bulk purchase of various goods and services for the country and not having them properly delivered but yet vendors and suppliers receiving these funds and not even being held accountable. As you were just telling us about certain potential vendors, you said SETI, Rediffusion, BMC, is that one of the companies?
Yeah.
And that you were saying that most of these companies, which are still existing, up to now, have not accounted for over $3-point-something million worth of public property and money?
When the PRC took over, they conceded to the concept of centralizing the procurement of government goods and services. So the General Services Agency was the instrument or the entity of government charged with that responsibility. And therefore, a scheme called the bulk purchasing scheme was introduced. All procurement budgets were centralized at the General Services Agency, and they did the buying. That program went into full swing by 1981, and they were supposed to buy goods and services, and the rest of us will go and take delivery from GSA warehouses. That system was abused, grossly abused, to the effect that by the time Clarence Momolu took over in 1983, in the middle of 1983, he held a press conference with ELTV, ELBC, and revealed that $3.5 million worth of goods and services were still with vendors since 1981. And so my entity undertook to verify that statement and to identify the goods and services and the vendors. And we did identify vendors and established that the goods and services were truly paid for but not delivered. And this was a sharing scheme. Dillon's brother got the highest on the local scene. He got 1.2 million. BMC got 500,000. SETI brother 500,000. Salam about 200,000. And all of these people, while this matter was going on, that was in the middle of 1984 now, the NFEC was dissolved in the middle of that investigation and were redeployed with the Ministry of National Security. That ministry did not follow up on that matter. Clarence Momolu, who made a revelation, and we established that what he said was true. We don't know if he followed up to retrieve the goods. But we know for sure, as I said earlier, I can testify today and tomorrow that by March 1985, when we were redeployed to the Ministry of National Security, none of those goods had been retrieved from the vendors because we were investigating and identifying. So when we got dissolved, we don't know whether or not the goods were retrieved.
Thank you. This brings to my mind the concern about another area called domestic debts. I've heard that this has been a huge outstanding factor. So when you give me this kind of information, it means that there should be some sort of auditing done in this area to verify the validity of such debts. I mean, you're working out here now with the GSA agency, and do you all look into these kind of issues within the realm of the so-called outstanding domestic debts during this investigative period? Have you done any research or any what you call audits in this area?
Well, I had experience with the issue of domestic debts. My own way of working and the way of seeing things and knowing what has been obtaining here kept telling me that 99% fiasco. No services were rendered. They didn't exist. And so 2005, let me just give this story. 2005, Julie Bryan set up this anti-corruption task force that I headed. And we made a lot of compilation of acts of corruption. When the Unity Party government came into being, based on the findings, and knowing that they were saying there was a $3 million or $3 billion domestic debt we wrote a proposal that, hey, the domestic debts we are about to pay, don't pay them until a vetting of the vouchers has taken place. Because we know and we can prove that many of the vendors who are now lining up cannot show that they supply. If a man tells me he gave 10,000 chairs to MCSS, I need to see his warehouse. I need to see the machines he got to have produced 10,000 chairs. I need to see who took delivery of them. Lastly, I need to identify the chairs physically. But these people are rushing and they will want money, so they are coming. And so I wrote a proposal. That proposal went up to the highest authority, and it was agreed that a joint local vetting team comprising of the General Auditing Commission, the Bureau of the Budget, Finance Ministry, and GSA. I recommended 4 entities. And we agreed that they will undertake this vetting. A few weeks after that, we heard that a group of professional vetters had come and they have been paid, I think, $500,000 to vet the vouchers at the Finance Ministry. The vouchers were vetted, payment began, and I don't think it went more than 3 days because non-existent people were being paid. And I understand the executive branch put a halt to that payment because it was characterized by flaws. It was yet another opening. It was intended to put money in other people's pocket. So again, you see, somebody had to have the gusto on this issue of corruption. Somebody somewhere must say, look, this is how we think it's supposed to be done. And because it's a wheelbarrow pusher talking about it, don't put him on the side. Not because it's a wheelbarrow pusher talking about it, so you put him on the side. Caesar did that. And he knew what happened. They stabbed him in the parliament. Caesar was ascending the stairs. And the little poor man sitting down there held his guy and said, oh Caesar, read my will, read my document. I got something here for you. Oh, leave the man, leave the man. You got nothing important. What was contained in that man's testimony was only to tell Caesar, I sit around the stairs every day and I hear these people. Today they plan to assassinate you. Don't go to this meeting. If you read the Caesar history, they will tell you those things. Therefore, we in authority must listen to the least of us on matters that they know about. So I know that much about the vouchers, and it's a sad incident that government had to pay people who didn't render services, who cannot prove that they render services, simply because somebody at the time wanted some money in their pocket, and this is not the way to go.
It seems that the problem becomes how to make the system of justice transparent and independent of the source of the injustice. And this becomes a complex issue because where does it start and where does it stop is a headache unless you deal with a type of solution that can vaccine all the people of the society, meaning the upgrading of our moral and ethical values as a way forward to fight against corruption. By the way, another question I have here is, in your opinion now, what do you foresee as some of these root factors for Liberia's culture of impunity, corruption? And do you see any potential solutions that have recently been applied that are good, or others that you would recommend for us to look into?
Well, as we speak, we are aware of the creation of the Public Procurement Commission. We think they are an instrument that will fight corruption. We know the civil service is undergoing orientation. They also will fight in the area of reducing ghost names. Recently, their mandate also suggests that they can fight corruption. The General Auditing Commission, their activities are geared towards fighting corruption. And of course, the Justice Ministry and the Anti-Corruption Commission. They are all instruments in place But again, if all of these people wrote all of the reports, and these reports landed nowhere because of the lack of political will, we still go nowhere. And so that is what is required so that we try to address some of these issues. And the TRC has now come to crown everything. That look, all of what everybody doing from this period to this period, can we start from here afresh? Can we say as of now, let us say put back everything from 1978 to now, all spilled milk, don't cry over them. Can we start from 2004 afresh? Can we just begin to go and identify corruption beginning 2004, and that we insist that we will have political will? Can we do that? We need to do that. Otherwise, after 10 years, another TRC will come. So we got to make up our mind as a people, as a nation, in our little corners. The students will have to tell themselves we got to stop spying. Teachers will have to agree to stop accepting cell phones and scratch cards for grades. Messengers will have to stop stealing reams of paper. Ministers will have to stop engaging in grant corruption, processing vouchers, fictitious deliveries. We have to decide that we will start. And if we cannot start, then it behooves the state to put into place an instrument that will make us start.
For civil society in this interconnected loop of protection, especially with regards to the fact that if government is lack, could they somehow be able to put sort of a global pressure that could help facilitate executive having greater moral will, or you think that's not strong enough?
I myself belong to the civil society. I'm the national vice president for the Liberia National Law Enforcement Association. I think our interpretation and concept of civil society, for me, is different. I remember Led Walesa from Poland. He led the port workers in Poland, is that it? Very powerful civil society. When he spoke, the country stood up. When he spoke, the country listened, because there was that one unit that spoke with one voice. Today's civil society in Liberia, we can count about 300. And 300 have 300 interests. 300 have 300 agenda. And therefore, if civil society A goes to the civil society meeting and say, look, Minister X from agency A, we got this thing, we need to send it in. That Minister A turns out to be a relative of civil society B relative, and that matter goes nowhere. But we cannot continue to have a complacent and insensitive civil society. I hear civil society personnel, some of them clap for people. They say, the argument they raised with me sometimes, but the man stole the money, he built a house here. And I say, no. Whether you build a house in Israel, you build it in America, you build it in Liberia. If it is from stolen money, you stole money. There is no justification for stealing to say that because the man built a house here. So I asked one civil society forum, how many members of the 16 tribes live in our house we are clapping for today? That they built a house here. Can we count 16 of us representing each tribe in our house benefiting from the electricity and the state-of-the-art technology? Nobody answered. Then why are we clapping when people steal money and buy a house in America and buy it here? So civil society needs to get out of its complacency. They need to begin to see the issue of corruption as a menace, because the corrupt people live in a community. The corrupt people, as soon as they appoint them, it is in our very community, they build the skyscrapers. What do the civil society people in our community do? They have an obligation to tell the convening authority, hey, the man you just appointed minister, you had a photograph of his house. The man has gone to roof level in 3 months. You please call him and ask him where he got the money from. Because United Nations anti-corruption program calls for that. Illicit enrichment. The anti-corruption commission or the government has a right under the United Nations Convention to call in anybody who is suspects has a lifestyle that is reasonably cannot be justified by his income. That's United Nations ruling. Those laws are on the books. And so we don't have to wait for somebody to bring complaint before we act on it. Better still, civil society has an obligation because the government cannot see everywhere, but we civil society people, we live in the communities with the people. The places they're taking the money is where we live. If we work in the banks, it is through us they are transferring the money. We know about them.
Thank you. My last concern is, you mentioned a young man who gave his life to protect the former president during the Flagamiton issue. And you said that this man is still alive today? He was a SSS or some security?
Yeah, Ross. His name is Ross. I think Ross is still around. I saw him a couple of years ago.
Full name, please?
Sir?
His full name, please.
Oh,
you don't remember? Okay.
Ross.
Ross.
Yeah, it's R-O-S-S, his last name, Ross.
Okay.
He had a shop at the back of the mansion. We used to go there. We just call each other, blah, 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 but I knew him well. I saw him after he returned from the hospital.
No, you know, the reason I think about this is because one of our concerns is that the victims of this period need to be carefully considered and given greater hope to protect against the repetition of our past. This man was doing a job, from what you just described, and he was willing to give his life to protect the leader of this country. And the question is, what does he have now even to show for that? Does he have some retirement assistance, or is he just out there struggling and his children struggling? Then how can we really bring a solution to social economic injustice? And TRC's mandate is to look into trust fund security and protection for such people. So that's why I was just concerned when you mentioned that particular case, that at least we need to have it on record and see what we can do to follow up on that.
I can do a rundown. I can do a rundown on Ross' whereabouts, his full name, and signal you people.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, that he's around. But I know I saw him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm finished.
Hello. Mr. Juniors,
Good morning.
good afternoon.
Good
Thank you
afternoon.
very much for coming. And it is gratifying to know that we still have good people around. So we really appreciate you taking time off to share with us your own knowledge on this pestilence that is corruption, that is destroying the fabric of our society. Thank you very much. I was just wondering, as an expert in your field, did you also have the opportunity to investigate the fire truck scandal at the time, the Benny Ashon fire truck scandal that involved Mrs. Mona Stubblefield and gradually dragging Harper Bailey, who was accused of trying to bribe the Chief Justice, Chair Chipo, and then eventually dragged in the president at the time, Mr. Samuel Doe? Do you have any information on that you would like to share with us? What was the actual story?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't take active role in the incident. And we heard what else everybody heard. And we didn't take any part in it. Yeah, but later on we know we met Chair Chipo in corridors and we all exchanged notes, but we didn't take any active part in it. Yeah.
The bulk purchasing system, do you know who introduced it? Was it introduced by the GSA or by the PRC government, or was it a system that was in place by previous administration before the PRC came to power? What was the rationale behind the bulk purchasing system?
Well, GSA was established in 1971. So I want to safely presume that the bulk purchasing system had been there before that time. If that was not the case. We heard about it 1981, because I know at the mansion 75, 76, 77, 78 we were buying our own goods and services. But by 1981, that was when, as a professional president, I first heard of that scheme. But GSA was around since 1971, I understand. And
So you heard about that bulk purchasing system in 1981?
yeah, I know the one that took place in 1981.
Okay, because we have had other accounts narrated to us that that system was actually introduced by former President Charles Taylor at the time when he was at the GSA. I just thought, since you knew a lot about these things, maybe you could have corroborated that for us.
Oh, no, that is when we actually heard of a bulk purchasing scheme,
Okay.
1981. Whether it existed before that time, no. But 1981, GSA submitted the proposal to the 1980 GSA submitted a proposal to the PRC that it is good for one entity to buy. And everybody was like haywire, because we were with PRC, people would talk with somebody, then they thought it was a good idea. And so they all ran for it, and that is how it ended.
You passionately spoke about the many ills of corruption, having a corrupt society, economic crimes. And you spoke about the little men down there whom public officials, especially the big shots, need to pay attention to. Recently, we have had one or two cases of whistleblowers. One example was the, I think, Port Authority and other places. Because of this new political dispensation now, people are beginning, Liberians say, people's eyes are opening, so people are beginning to report or expose corruption more and more. How do you feel about this whistleblower thing that is emerging now? Is it a good thing to encourage whistleblowers? One. Two, as a security expert, what would be some of those concerns that we need to address as a nation or as people wanting to change things positively, wanting to end this culture of corruption or impunity? How do we protect such people, like whistleblowers, people who are in the system, they are a part of the system, but they don't like the ugly things they see, they want things to change, and so they will be the ones to say, look, this thing is happening, these people are involved in corruption, this is what is going on, to alert people or the authority against corrupt officials and corrupt practices. How do we protect such individuals?
The United Nations protocols on corruption, as well as the African Union protocols on corruption, both call for protection or enactment of legislation, domestic legislation, to protect whistleblowers. And I will be happy when we can speed up a bill, send it to the House, whoever will sponsor it, so that they can begin to protect whistleblowers. Because the dynamics of corruption in our parlance, the way it works, one can safely say corruption is kuku jumuku. If you're not inside, you don't know. And therefore, it is not likely that 2 persons or 3 persons who can make an act of corruption and are satisfied from the benefit equally will go and blow whistle. It is not likely. And therefore, you have to encourage bystanders or hearers or people who handle documents so they can be protected to go and blow the whistle. Because if I went into cahoot with someone and we got a 500,000, I got my fair share, nobody will ever hear me. I'm not going to be the complainant. So the government, the state needs a point system to encourage whistleblowing. It is good to do that. I was heading the anti-corruption task force set up by Julie Bryan. I documented 35 cases in 6 months. 32 of them came to me through whistleblowers. 3 were reported by individuals and institutions. And those cases are being prosecuted today. Whistleblowers who came to me and said, S, Y, blah, Z. We need to encourage them because they are the messengers. They are the guys who remove one voucher from one place to another. They are the ones who go to the bank and then cash checks and bring it to the boss people. They are the ones who the boss man sent to sell the whole booklet of gas slips. They are the ones who took a car across the border and sold it on behalf of the boss man. We need to encourage them. So we should have domestic legislation to protect, to encourage, and to protect. Sadly, one whistleblower died recently. It was a sad incident. I think everything should have been done to listen to that brother. That's why we're talking about. Even when we barrel pusher, somebody should have had the guts. Someone should have had guts in his heart to say, all right, let me hear what you got to say. But again, corruption fights back. Who knows? The people who were blowing the whistle on, they too were making sure that they blocked the whistle from sounding. That's how it works. And so we need to encourage whistleblowers. We need law to protect them.
Okay, how have whistleblowers been treated? Do you know any instances where someone who tried to expose corruption was maltreated? This last whistleblower who unfortunately passed away was complaining of being, I think he said he was unfairly dismissed from his job. In the 30 cases that you have investigated so far or you've worked on, have whistleblowers complained about being unfairly treated as a result of the exposure of corruption? And what mechanism or what was done to encourage them?
Well, in my career, when I was active, we depended a lot on whistleblowers, both in the economic crime sector as well as in the intelligence sector. We relied on people to provide information. And if it is any success story, then I can say, well, we were successful because the way we treated the people who talked to us. I have never had an experience where a whistleblower in my work was ill-treated. The one outstanding instance that we all know is the one that was going around recently where the family of this brother said that they feel the boy was poisoned because he was talking too much. My only dislike about the whole thing that it took too long for somebody to listen to this brother. Because every now and then he was in the newspaper. Every now and then he was walking somewhere to inform somebody to say something. Every now and then, one time he's ready to go back to job, another time he's not back to job. I think somebody should have listened to him. Today, whatever information he got, he's dead. Nobody got that information.
Working in several governments as a security expert in other fields, and corruption has been with us throughout. And you have seen corrupt officials come and come and come, like filtered through successive governments. What will you say now when you are, not to be unfair to this government, but this government is the government of the day. So what do you see now? Do you see that some of this corruption has filtered in amongst us at the official level? Do you see some of these corrupt people or people who had a tendency to be corrupt filter in? How high are they? Do you see some of the same systems, the same corrupt system that plague our society? Do you see some of these systems reintroduced or being facilitated? You don't have to name names, but just give us, a little, just a little understanding whether you think indeed we are moving forward or it's just being recircled.
Well, I can say
Is there hope? Is there hope?
Yeah, I can say this. If we did a comparative analysis, one can conclude that Tolbert's administration for me was an eye-opener. It just showed people what corruption was. The PRC really introduced what should happen in terms of carrying out corrupt practices. And they continue into all of the years of the war. Every system that came had its own form of corruption. The Taylor years, the use of the word corruption was more or less a taboo word. I never heard any public servant or official of government address any forum where they talk about corruption. Perhaps when the clergymen, the religious leaders, they spoke about corruption from the pulpit. The situation has not changed much. What has happened now? People are beginning more liberally to discuss corruption. Today, an honored man can look at his boss with one piece of paper in hand and say you are corrupt and make a big issue out of it. To determine whether such allegations are true or not, this current system needs now to be proactive. It needs to go in there the minute it hears these rumors, to go in there and deal with them. Otherwise, the ordinary guy, the wheelbarrow pusher, will continue to think that corruption is more widespread than it was. People are now becoming more sensitive. The corruption is being discussed everywhere. That does not mean there is no corruption. The way to determine is to go in there and find out what is happening. I cited the GSA issue, but now the government should have a 4-5-man team going to GSA, fast track, run through there in 2-3 days and see what is happening there. And so corruption takes a lot of methodologies. Corruption is continuing in various ways. People are becoming more professional about corruption. People are becoming more secretive, and the use of technology now giving a lot of help to perpetuate corrupt practices. But no nation is free of corruption. Corruption is not a peculiar phenomenon. It's not strange for any one nation. All nations are involved in it. They just need to put in place mechanism to address it. So to sit here and tell you this place, this time is not corrupt, I will be misleading you. From what we read in the newspaper every day, what we hear on the radio stations, there is need for us to become more proactive to prove those people wrong.
Do you see some of those officials, they don't even have to be officials or members of society, who were known or who were involved in corrupt practices around today in position of trust? And how does it make someone like you feel who is so passionate against corruption?
You know, in other countries, especially in the law enforcement and national security sector, they have what they call professional pool. In that professional pool are experts, whether they retire, whether they're active, they are there. If the government wants to take a position, say in the economy, they go into the professional pool and bring economists from there and say, look, tell us, how do we go about this? In law enforcement, for example, if we had a professional pool and say the government wants to recommend someone, they will go to that pool and ask, do you have dossier on this person? And if that were obtaining here, I can tell you, many of the people around here will not be in government. I can tell you that. If they had a pool, if they have somewhere where they went to consult, if we're vetting the resume of people who are in government, many persons around here will not be in government. I can tell you that.
Okay, my last question centers around your experience as a security expert. The coup of 1980, we have had many witnesses come here and gave their own version of what they thought happened and what they wanted to share with the commission. including security experts, some of those who worked directly with the late President Tolbert. Of interesting conversation were some of those security experts who came and shared light with us on about the coup, especially on the night of the coup. And one of the picture that's stuck in my head is one of when one of the witnesses testified. I think it was Mr. Wilfred Clark, who was, I think, police director during the coup. No, he wasn't. I guess police director during the coup or so. But he was seriously involved in national security. So I think portion of his version of that story was that the security apparatus at the time seems to have not been cohesive, or maybe not in sync with each other, because as the president was upstairs in his suite being assassinated, you had key security officers who were not on duty that night. Some of them were on duty. One person was downstairs on his radio speaking to who we don't know, or another person was not around. So, you know, it leaves a bleak picture in your mind as to what really happened, where the security personnel around the president not up to the task. They did not have information that this coup was going to take place. Were they part of the coup plotters? Were they part of the coup? What really happened that night? And I would appreciate if maybe briefly you have the time to just share your own, you know, your own thoughts on that subject with us, please.
Well,
what happened to the president's security that night?
this is, all my colleagues know this is one topic I've always avoided. I avoided it most of the time because at least my friends know, and I know, they know what I know. The 1980 coup was an unfortunate incident. From where I sat at the time, I think, and I know it was well planned, it was laid out perfectly, and without calling any names.
The coup was a coup that was organized by insiders in the government, outsiders, or both groups coming together.
When I tell you this, I know what I'm saying or what I'm about to say because at the time, I served as Director of Foreign and Domestic Intelligence Directorate at the Ministry of National Security on Patrick Minicom. My job was to monitor movements of persons suspected to be dissidents. I was also sectoring reports coming from our external sources. And so I was sitting pretty as far as national security was concerned. And I sent in most of the information. I edited most of the information and knew what was happening. The coup was well orchestrated. It was well planned, both by insiders and by outsiders. And as far as the security nature of it was concerned, there was a general consensus based on the cooperative spirit that security would be laxed at a particular date and time. And therefore, all of those individuals that were heading major security institutions and that were aware put some relaxation in the structure, in the operation. And so I listened to most of the guys in the coup. They are my friends. When they left from here, some of them went and met me, we laughed, and we talked things. In any case, the execution failed. At the time, we had about 5-6 military barracks, and all of the commanders at those barracks all agreed in a spirit of cooperation. The only barracks that did not agree was the Shuffling Barracks. The Shuffling Barracks commander and leadership did not agree. Did not agree to the extent that it just didn't want to take part, they didn't want to be part of that discussion. But all the other barracks, the leadership knew what was happening. Here in Monrovia, yes, top security people knew. You cannot be the Minister of National Security and do not know that such a thing is happening. Sometimes you reach a point in your job and even become inevitable. You reach a point, there is nothing you can do about a thing. I don't care how much you want to do, there is nothing you can do about a thing. It will come to pass. So if your point of no return is the next 48 hours, all you do is prepare yourself for your escape. Because you know in the next 48 hours it will happen. And so to answer your question, yes, we know about the coup. Some of us learned about it long before it took place. And when I reflect now, there was a time if a particular period, if I wrote in my diary, but that diary got destroyed during the war. If that period, for example, Patrick Minicon had called me, said, Juniors, you don't look happy. You look nervous. Perhaps the coup would have not taken place. Perhaps it would have not taken place. Between August 1985 to October 1985, if Patrick Minicon had called and asked me, so you look nervous. You don't look okay. The coup was not taking place, maybe. Because it was a tense moment. And sometimes you get yourself in a place that you're not supposed to be. And sometimes you know so much it becomes overwhelming, you are afraid to even talk. So yes, the coup was well planned. There were people on the ground. Because everybody worked in cells. Everybody worked in cells. You knew your cell leader, you knew your cell code. And that's how it was carried out.
For the sake of clarification, I'm talking about the 1980 coup.
1980 coup,
Yeah, when President...
1980 coup, I was at a mansion. I had been assigned in Cape Mount. That was planned by the military. They met at a place that I know well. I wasn't there, but my colleagues were there. In the last 1 hour movement, they left from our house in PHP and went to the mansion. And the guys thought that if they went there, they would succeed. So from PHP, they passed the back through the Budget Bureau Road and into the mansion yard. That much I know about it because I know where it was planned, I know where they met. I was in Cape Mount, but I have friends who took part. All of them are dead men now anyway.
1980 coup was actually planned and staged by the soldiers.
1980 coup when Pagos and the rest of the guys were in jail. And then rumors started going that they would be executed. These ranking soldiers and their other junior men, master sergeant, staff sergeant, corporal, they decided that they would take a chance, that they would not let this happen. They would not let this guy die. And so they began to hold series of meetings in PHP at Podium's residence. They held series of meetings in various homes in the PHP area and decided that they would take the day into their hands. If people outside the military were involved, I won't know. But as much as I know, that is what happened.
Now, when Mr. Wilfred Clark testified, he testified that one of them were, I think was, he testified that he was downstairs in the yard of the executive mansion on his, I think,
80 or 85?
1982, I'm talking about the Tolbert's assassination.
Wilfred Clark?
He testified that he was around the area where they had the tomb of the unknown soldier at the time, on his walkie-talkie or whatsoever, but there were clearly security lapses. And then I think Massacre didn't come to work that evening or whatsoever. So you could see where the security of the president was not really intact that night.
The 1980 coup.
The 1980 coup. Now, yeah, there are also other versions that it could have been a right-wing coup because there were some people in the Tolbert's government, even at the cabinet level, some civilians as well, who were not happy with Tolbert and the way he was going. They thought he was too soft in the way he was dealing with the Barker Matthews issues, I mean the progressive issues. And they said there were two coups in the making that night. So a coup was inevitable according to the different stories. Now I just want to know whether you know anything, whether outside of the soldiers, the securities were involved, whether members within Tolbert's government was involved, whether outsiders were involved who helped the soldiers.
Well, what we heard, some of the people we talked to at the time, because after the coup, we and these soldiers, we all were friends, moving up and down. Tolbert was addressing a program here that night at the executive pavilion. These soldiers have been meeting at the PHP and agreed that would be a good thing that night. Jebo was originally in a group, and so according to them, they divided up and asked Jebo he should go to wait at the Fender campus area. Just in the evening, the president would decide to go to Bento, and that they will remain in town. We'll undertake the act here. But then it was suggested that if you guys went on Ashmont Street and opened a fire, it may cause chaos. So it's better to do this thing at the mansion. So Jebo remained where he was until Tolbert left from there and decided that he would not go to Bento. In any event, there was still another group here. Now, as for what Wilfred Clark said, he was around. He must be at the mansion at the time. What security structure or operation they had in place that night, I don't know. But after the coup, and we began to sit on table and talk, we begin to hear how plans were carried out and how they were successful. How Doe was not eating, how they said Doe was not eating upstairs when the actual execution went on. How it was Wesson who sat in the chair. Podia was saying that Wesson sat in the chair, and Kuwamba twins him, a man move on the chair now for the chair for the master. The master coming, sending for the master, all that stuff. They told us the story because we and then interacted at length. But it was, in my mind, from what they said, it was their making, And they said that they would not see these guys, Marcus Matthews. Everybody had their relatives there. Oscar Kia came from the southeast. So everybody was like protecting their own people. They wanted to make sure that their people, they didn't die that kind of death.
From what you know, is it true that there were plans to execute Marcus Matthews and the rest of them by the government at the time? Do you think so?
You know, sometimes in national security, when we're gathering information, sometimes you hear some wild rumors. Some very, very wild rumors. I remember, just to backtrack, I remember during the Doe administration, the issue with Alari Tokba and the rest of the guys, with Branell, Alari Tokba and these guys, the 6 university students that they had a post-target. That Wednesday, rumors started going around that the people will be executed on Friday. And so Thursday, the civil society, students group, LINSU, they called for an all-night vigil. Everybody wore black and purple and white, whatever it is. Some groups were at the MCSS schools, all of the MCSS schools. Newport Street will be assigned because that's where I was assigned. And waiting that these people will be executed. So, growing under that kind of rumors, people can go and do anything. Because Doe was to speak the next day, Friday. Doe was supposed to speak Friday. So, everybody wrongly assumed, or in their mind rightly assumed that Doe will be saying they're executing the people. So, we're holding a vigil. And you all were here, university students, they took the lead in organizing a vigil.
The events before the coup of 1988.
Yeah, that's what I was coming to. And so, out of that, Alari took back then rumors that they would be killed. Anything could have happened. So I assume it is the same rumors that went around on the Marcus Matthews then issue. I guess somebody just said they will execute these people. Of course, the rumors went around. And without any evidence that there would be an execution, the soldiers just decided that they would not let this happen. And they took that preemptive strike, they took the preemptive action. But I do not know for sure that there was an agreement or there was a plan that these people will be executed. I won't know for sure.
Okay. Just to clarify, when you spoke of the coup the first time, and when you spoke that the security everybody knew except Shuffling, were you referring to the November 12th?
Yeah, I referring to after you were talking about the November 85 coup.
Okay, so that's what you were referring to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.